So, first set of tasks for your half-term homework. We're looking at the links between superpowers and IGOs, intergovernmental organisations, and how they use those to influence their power around the world. Ignore that box there, that shouldn't be there. So we have to think about a variety of IGOs, in particular the World Bank, the IMF, the WTO and the World Economic Forum. It's all about how countries use free trade and the concepts of capitalism to spread their influence. In terms of the syllabus there, you can see that we're hitting 2 or 3 of the key points. So first off is a little bit of graph analysis. So the key points here are that long-term growth and export volumes are increasing, and that's the general overall trend. Obviously there's things like the 2008 financial crash which will cause blips in these patterns, but the general trend shows that they're increasing. And you can see this more clearly here in terms of export volumes. You've got the 2008 crash right there. Long-term growth, you've got the depression here. So there's a blip, so we're going back well over 100 years here. We've got stock crashes in '87. We've got oil embargoes. We've got coming up to the end of the war. This is quite an interesting one. In terms of real-term growth, coming towards the end of the war was essentially driven by industry, because all the industry was put aside for making weapons and making things to win the war. So obviously GDP growth and industrial output increased. World merchandise trade, again, general trend is that it is increasing. So what we need to do next is think more specifically about the WTO. Essentially, it's just about making sure that world trade is fair. Not necessarily the best thing. If we think of the example of Brexit, if Britain leaves the EU without a trade deal with the rest of the EU, it will have to fall back onto WTO rules, which in terms of taxes and tariffs and things aren't actually particularly good. But the general idea of the WTO is to kind of act as a referee, really. So we've looked at WTO, and based on that, we look again at these graphs and think about the changes that the WTO has made to some of these patterns. We might be able to see some correlations in terms of what the WTO does and when it was set up, and we can see whether it does help GDP growth and trade and what have you. And then I would like you to have a go at this question here. Using named examples, assess the relative importance of economic, so we're talking about the WTO, we're talking about IGOs, military and cultural factors in influencing superpower status. So 4-part structure, but of course there are 3 specific points there. So you're going to have to do arguments for and arguments against each one. So rather than having 2 paragraphs in the middle, you're probably going to be having 3, but just try and make them a little bit more condensed and smaller before you get to your conclusion. Now, this table here is quite useful in terms of revision. It's just a very, very condensed, tabulated form showing all these different IGOs, who's in there, when they joined, and some of the roles that they play. And to just dive a little bit deeper into that, you can have a go at doing those questions in your notes as well.